Alright, here's my complete build guide for Cyrene. In this video, we'll first go through her kit and playstyle, followed by her Eidolons, her best builds, some notes on her rotations, and finally her synergies. Given her super long kit, it's gonna be a super long video, so use the timestamps if needed. Leave a like if you find this video helpful. Also, please check the pinned comment for any extra notes or corrections. And with that, let's get started. This video is sponsored by LD Shop, a safe and reliable game top-up site. From the creators of one of the best emulators, LD Player, it offers affordable prices in most game items through official ways. Like games such as Honkai Star Rail and Genshin Impact top-ups are purchased from Razer Gold, so you don't have to worry about getting banned. Something I can testify for myself, as I have been using it for my monthly supply passes. It also does not require any of your account information, just the user ID and server. You just hop into LD Shop, select your preferred game, select the pack, then type your UID and server, and then just click on top up, select your preferred payment option, and that's basically it. Within a moment, you get your jades. It's a fast and easy process with tons of positive reviews. And also, if you are someone who regularly spends on the game, there's a VIP system that rewards you with a free express supply pass if you spend over $80 a month. Also, if you use my link, you'll be getting free coupons for even more discounts. I know you'll be spending for your favorite character, so why not do yourself a favor and save some money? Just click on the link in the description or in the pinned comment and check out LD Shop. So, Cyrene, she's a 5-star ice unit following the path of remembrance. She is an HP scaling support or sub DPS with a unique ultimate that requires points, similar to units like Phainon. She is the most premium unit in HSR in my opinion, because she is super specific about who she synergizes with, and also requires some premium supports in order to function properly. For her base stats, she has pretty high HP, low attack, and good defense. She has 101 speed with a unique ultimate needing 24 points. Starting with her abilities, everything in her kit is tied to her ultimate, and that requires points. These are called recollection points. She needs 24 points to use her ultimate, and she can hold up to 27, and there are several ways she can acquire them. Her basic attack is a single target hit that generates 1 recollection point, but she also has an enhanced basic attack that we will talk about in a bit. Her skill generates 3 points and deploys a zone for 2 turns that grants 24% true damage buff to all allies. For her talent, when the battle starts, or when Cyrene takes a turn, she will grant future to all ally units and Memosprites, and when these ally units take a turn or use any ability, they will consume this future buff and generate 1 point of recollection. Do note that a unit first needs to have the future buff in order to consume it and then generate a point. So if a unit takes 2 turns before Cyrene, that will only generate 1 recollection point. Lastly, when Cyrene is on the field, the whole team gets a 20% damage boost. Now after Cyrene has 24 points, she can now use her ultimate, which summons her Memosprite, which is basically her, and grants it 1 extra turn. It also activates all ally ultimates, and this goes for herself as well, so she gains 2 ultimates back to back. She then enters this unique state called Ripples of the Past Reverie, and this is a permanent state, meaning after entering it, this will last throughout the battle. While in this state, she gives herself 50% crit rate and makes her skill's true damage zone to stay permanently active from there on. Now before I start with the Memosprite, there are a few things to note about the unique state. First, in this state, all subsequent Cyrene ultimates will only cost 12 recollection points, meaning only her first ultimate needs 24 points. Also, while in this state, her basic attack gets enhanced, and from there on, she will only be able to use the enhanced basic attack, because the unique state is just permanent. As for the enhanced basic attack, it deals AoE damage to all enemies and generates 3 points of recollection. Lastly, her technique, which is nothing special. It creates a zone that lasts 30 seconds, in which all ally movements are increased, and when entering combat, it automatically deploys the true damage zone from Cyrene's skill with the same duration, which is 2 turns. Now time for the Memosprite. First of all, this Memosprite has 0 speed and will not appear in the action order, meaning Cyrene's ultimate giving it an extra turn is the only way for this Memosprite to take a turn. And this also means that for the first ultimate, the Memosprite gets to take 2 turns because Cyrene gets 2 ultimates for the first time. Also, while the Memosprite is present on the field, both Cyrene and the Memosprite gets 24% HP boost, and when it is summoned, it dispels all crowd control debuffs from all allies. Now for their abilities, on their turn, the Memosprite can do 2 things. They can either attack with their skill, which deals AoE damage to all enemies, or they can buff a single unit. And this is the most important part of Cyrene's kit. When the Memosprite buffs a unit, there are several factors that come into play. First, if the targeted unit is a Chrysos heir, they gain a special effect, which is specific to each unit. And if the target is not a Chrysos heir, then they and their Memosprite, if they have one, will get a simple 40% damage boost for 2 turns. So this pretty much tells you how specific Cyrene is with her synergies. You really don't want to play her in a team with non-Chrysos heir units. And there is another reason for it, and that is in her passives. The first one makes it so that when an ally Memosprite is summoned, they automatically gain the future buff, and when they use any ability, it does not get consumed, unlike other units, meaning a fast-acting Memosprite can generate as many recollection points as they want without worrying about the future buff. And this is the reason why Hyacine is so broken for Cyrene. She's Remembrance, has a fast Memosprite that can act very frequently. She is by far Cyrene's best teammate, to the point that if you don't have Hyacine, it's hard to recommend pulling for Cyrene. The second passive gives Cyrene up to 6 recollection points at the start of the battle, based on how many Chrysos heirs or Remembrance units are in the team. You need 3 of them to get 6 points at the start, and this is the reason why you always want to play her with a Chrysos heir team. And you always want to maximize this passive, because the gap between 2 and 3 Chrysos heirs is 3 points. And you definitely don't want to miss that. And once again, Hyacine perfectly fits the requirement. Lastly, the third passive gives all ally a bit of a damage boost if Cyrene is above 180 speed, and for any excess speed after that, will give extra ice rest pen to Cyrene, up to 60 excess speed. So you want to make sure you build your Cyrene at least above 180 speed. For her bonus stats, after maxing out her traces, Cyrene gets 37.3% crit damage, 9 speed, and 10% HP. These are all great stats to have, especially that 9 speed, which will help with the high speed goals. Now with that done, let's talk about all of the special effects that every Chrysos heir gets. In total, Cyrene can buff up to 14 units, which includes RMC and herself. And this special effect is different for each unit, but they can be categorized into 3 types. The first type is the one-time effect buff. This is the kind of buff that needs to be reapplied again and again for the effect. Think of it like any action advance ability like Sunday's skill. It's something you can use again and again for the effect. The second one is the effective for the entire battle type. This is the type of buff that stays active throughout the battle once after it is applied. This can be a simple multiplier increase or some other mechanics that once you activate by using Cyrene's Memosprite skill, you do not have to use it again ever for the duration of the battle. The third type is unique. This is a type of buff that does not require Cyrene to use her support Memosprite skill on this unit. As long as she uses Memosprite skill on any unit, this buff will automatically trigger. This can be a bit confusing, so let's just start looking at all the specific special effects for each Chrysos heirs. Now before everyone else, what I want to get over with first is Cyrene herself. Yes, as I said, she also buffs herself with her ultimate. And this is the third type of buff that doesn't even need a trigger from the Memosprite. As for what this buff does, when Cyrene gains recollection points from each teammates except for her own Memosprite, and she uses her attack Memosprite skill, which is an AoE attack, it will now deal an additional instance of damage to a random target. Also, after Cyrene uses her ultimate, or when her Memosprite is summoned, she will gain 1 stack of story. And after she has 3 stacks, her Memosprite will consume all 3 stacks and automatically use the attack Memosprite skill. This is really helpful because every time you get a turn for the Memosprite with her ultimate, you don't want to waste that turn to attack. You always want to buff an ally instead. So this kinda helps with her personal damage, and also to trigger her signature Lightcone, which I'll talk about later in the video. Note that after her first ultimate, every subsequent ultimate will only need 12 points. And with her enhanced basic attack, it won't take 3 cycles for this attack to trigger. And now with that done, we can go through all the units in order. Starting from the beginning, we have the RMC. This is the second type of buff that requires Cyrene to use her Memosprite kill once, and then the buff will stay permanently. She first gives both RMC and Mem a bunch of attack and crit rate, which is great for damage. And then, after RMC uses their new enhanced basic attack, which if you don't know, right after RMC uses their ultimate, their next basic attack is enhanced. So after using that, Cyrene's Memosprite will automatically use the attack Memosprite skill, similar to how her own buff works. You see, that's why I wanted to explain her own buff first. Anyways, given RMC's enhanced basic attack is tied to their ultimate, which is pretty frequent, meaning this attack combined with Cyrene's own automatic attack will result in a solid amount of AoE damage for the team. This is a pretty good buff, and given RMC's synergy with Cyrene, as they are a remembrance unit and have a Memosprite, which makes them a really good point generator for Cyrene, and with all the extra damage, this is a really solid buff. Next we have Aglaea, and this is the first type of buff, which is a one-time effect, meaning Cyrene needs to use it again and again for the effect to trigger. So when the Memosprite uses the buff on Aglaea, her Memosprite garment maker will get the full 6 stacks of speed from their talent, and she will gain a buff called Romantic, and when she uses an attack, she will consume this buff and gain 70 energy. She also gets 72% damage boost and 36% def shred for all of her attacks until her supreme stand state, which is from her ultimate, ends. So basically she gets 70 energy, which is the same amount as Sunday, a full stack of speed buff for garment maker, and a bunch of damage buff. Overall, this is a solid buff, and you could use Cyrene in place of Sunday if you don't have him in your account. The next unit is Tribbie, and she gets a permanent buff. When Cyrene's Memosprite uses her skill on Tribbie, she gains 12% def shred for all of her attacks, and her follow-up attack will do an additional instance of additional damage from her zone, basically dealing a bit more damage. It's an okay buff, the def shred is definitely great, but the overall damage increase is nothing crazy. The biggest thing here is the fact that the buff is permanent, so after using it on her, you can just focus on buffing your other units. After that, we have Mydei. His buff, similar to Aglaea, is a one-time effect. When used on Mydei, it removes all crowd control debuffs from him, which is kind of funny as he is already immune to all CC debuffs, and if Mydei is in the Vendetta state, which he should always be, he gets an instant God Slayer Be God attack, which is his highest damage ability. And also, for this attack, his crit damage is increased by 200%. So basically a massive nuke every time Cyrene uses her buff on Mydei. If he's not in the Vendetta state, he gets a 100% action advance. But that's never gonna happen because Mydei should always be in the Vendetta state if played correctly. As for the buff, it's one of, if not the best buff for Mydei. The damage increase he gets from this is huge, so much so that Cyrene now becomes one of his best teammates. Next we have Castorice, and her buff, similar to Tribbie, is permanent. It allows Castorice to store overflow new bird points up to 200%, and that excess new bird gets converted into increasing the damage multiplier of her dragon's explosion attack. At max 200% new bird, the damage multiplier gets increased by 24%, so now it's 64% for 6 instances of damage. And if there are 2 or less enemies on the field, the multiplier is additionally increased by 48%, so then it becomes 112% for 6 instances. This makes the dragon's explosion attack do some insane damage, especially against 2 or fewer enemies. This also encourages you to always explode the dragon every time it is summoned, instead of holding for 3 turns. This is definitely one of the strongest Castorice buffs ever. It makes her even more crazy in 1-2 target scenarios, and the buff being permanent is just perfect. After that, we have Anaxa, and this is a one-time buff, which when used on Anaxa, it gives 1 skill point for the team and allows Anaxa to take action immediately. It also increases the number of instances of damage his skill does, from 5 to 8. So now a double skill will have 16 instances of damage, and if you add Cerydra to the mix, then a quadruple skill will have 32 instances of damage. Also, when Anaxa uses basic attack or skill, he will gain the True Knowledge buff, which simply gives all erudition units in the team a 60% attack increase and 40% skill damage boost until Anaxa's next turn. This part is kind of weird because this is basically made for the Herta, but since she is not a Krasos heir and Cyrene really wants to be played with Krasos heirs, it doesn't really synergize that well. Anyways, the first part is really good, an instant action advance with more damage through his skill, not to mention the extra skill point. It's a really good buff, which with the right teammates can make Cyrene a slightly better support for Anaxa than Sunday. After that, we have Hyacine, and this is the third type of buff that doesn't even need Cyrene to use her skill on Hyacine. When Cyrene's Memosprite uses their skill, made with the attack or a buff for an ally, Hyacine will gain 2 stacks of Ode to Sky, and while having these stacks, when Ika heals any target through any of their abilities, the tally of the healing for Ika's damage is increased by 72%, so basically more damage from Ika. But if Cyrene does use her Memosprite skill on Hyacine to buff her, she will gain all of the above, but also gain 24 energy. The buff in general is not insanely strong, the damage is solid, but it's nothing crazy. But the good thing is that you don't even have to use Cyrene's Memosprite skill on her, so it's a free damage increase for Ika, which is pretty cool. As for the energy, it's not important enough to always prioritize using Cyrene's buff on her. You mostly want to focus on the main DPS, but if the other teammates have permanent buffs, like in a Castorice team, then sure, it's always good to have more energy. After that, we have Cipher, and this too, like Castorice, is a permanent buff. When used on Cipher, it increases her damage by 36% and shreds the defense of the patron target by 20% and the rest of the targets by 12%. It's a really good buff, with damage increase for herself and def shed for the whole team. But since most of the teams she is used in are not Krasos heir based, like Feishao or Archer or even Akron, you won't really play Cipher with Cyrene. So even though it is a solid buff, you won't be using it that much. After that we have Phainon, and he also gets a permanent buff. What he does is that after using it, Phainon gets 6 core flames and a buff called Eternal Ignition. Now when transforming, if core flames exceed 12, the excess core flames will be converted into crit damage, where each excess core flame will give 12% crit damage, up to 72%. Now since Cyrene already gives all allies their ultimate, meaning these 6 extra core flames are for the crit damage buff. But at E0, Phainon can only hold up to 3 excess core flames, so this basically gives you 36% crit damage, until you get his E6, where the overflow cap is removed. Also, while having this Eternal Ignition buff, he also gets 16 crit rate, and after he finishes all of his extra turns, now his transformation will not end. Instead, after the final explosion attack, it will refresh all of his extra turns and he gains 4 Scorch points, similar to what he gets when he enters his transformation. Now at the start of his extra turns, he will consume 15% of his own HP, and after any attack, he will deal some additional fire damage hits. So it's a lot of stuff, but TLDR, Phainon gets some extra crit damage and crit rate, and a bit of extra fire damage, and he never exits his buff state, well unless he dies, which will end his transformation. Now this does sound really good. I mean, permanent transformation means crazy damage, right? Well, not quite. Apart from this permanent transformation, Cyrene's damage buff is lackluster compared to someone like Sunday. So Phainon's damage inside his transformation is now quite low compared to with Sunday. And since there is no Hyacine, Cyrene takes even longer to get her ultimate, and you don't really want to use Hyacine here. If you do want to sustain, then that will have to be Heng PT, who can provide shields even inside Phainon's transformation. But then there is only one support in the team, which is Cerydra, so the damage becomes even lower. So overall, it's not as good as it looks. In fact, I don't think Phainon is a good unit to be paired with Cyrene. Alright, the next unit is Hysilens, and her buff is a one-time effect. What it does is that Hysilens gets a buff called Flowing Warmth, and when she uses an attack, she will consume this buff and gain 60 energy. Also, her damage is increased by 120%, and when she uses her basic attack or skill to attack enemies, it will detonate all the dots currently present on the target. Now the detonation damage is 60% for the basic and 80% for the skill, which is slightly better than Kafka, but Kafka can do this a lot more frequently than Hysilens. It's an overall good buff, but given how Hysilens really want to be played in a proper dot team with Kafka and Black Swan, it's not the best option to use Cyrene here, as she is also super SP negative because she wants to gain those recollection points faster, and the dot team is already pretty SP heavy in the first place. And also, where would you use Hyacine here? If you switch Black Swan for Hyacine, the dot damage gets low, and if you don't, her point generation takes a massive hit, not to mention you are lacking a third Chrysos Air in the team. So it's similar to the Phainon situation. Like, sure, the buff is great, but Cyrene's specific teammate requirements holds her back. After that we have Cerydra, and her buff is permanent. When used on Cerydra, she gives 30% crit damage to the unit with the Military Merit buff, and after they proc a Kuda main or double skill, Cerydra gains 1 point of charge immediately. Now in my opinion, this is more of a fix to her kit than an actual buff. In her base kit, her crit damage buff is only for the double skill. So now this 30% crit damage buff is for all type of damage. Also, the Kuda Mine skill does not generate a charge for Cerydra. So now with this buff, it does, which will make it so that the DPS now gets slightly more frequent double skills. Overall, it's a solid fix in my opinion. And it is permanent, so just use it once and forget about it. After that we have Evernight, who also gets a permanent buff. When used, she gets a small 18% damage boost for her Memosprite explosion attack, and when she uses her skill or ultimate, she gains an additional point of Memoria, which is great for more damage. And finally, her crit damage buff to all Memosprites is increased, which is more so a buff for her teammates, especially Castorice. This also enables her to use a crit damage body piece instead of HP, that will both increase her personal damage and the damage of her teammates. With a bit lower HP, her charge generation for Castorice will decrease, but the overall team damage does end up higher. And lastly we have Heng PT, and his buff is similar to Hyacine, where he doesn't even need Cyrene to use her buff on him. As long as Cyrene uses her Memosprite skill on anyone, this buff will activate on Heng. As for what it does, it grants a buff called Ode to Earth to Heng, which stays permanently. This increases the Bond Mate's damage by 24%, and now all of Soul Dragon's attacks deals additional damage based on the Bond Mate's shield effect. If Cyrene were to use her buff on Heng, then in addition to all this, the Soul Dragon will get a 100% action advance, and will provide a much stronger shield with this turn. And also, this turn will not consume the enhancement counts from Danang's ultimate. Overall, it's more damage for the bondmate, more damage for the Soul Dragon, and overall better shields. It's a solid buff when paired with an attack scaling DPS, which also has to be a Kratos heir, so either Anaxa or Phainon. Mydei doesn't count because he does need healing. And that's all the 14 special effects that all 14 units get from Cyrene. Overall, apart from a few weird interactions, most of these buffs do provide a noticeable damage increase for all our current Kratos heir teams. Now let us talk about her Eidolons, because a few of you guys, even though it is not recommended to vertically invest on her, may want to do just that. Also, you guys may notice the lack of numbers and charts that I usually show with these segments. Well, that's because of how differently she works with every other Kratos heir. As such, a single chart will not work for every Kratos heir. Anyways, her E1 grants her 6 points of recollection after her Memosprite uses the automatic attack from her own buff. And also, the attack now deals additional bounces of damage. This is definitely a good Eidolon. 6 extra recollection points every 3 ultimates is nice for more frequent ultimates on her part. But since this only happens after the first ultimate, which still takes super long to get, it doesn't fix Cyrene's main issue, that is her slow ramp up time. Her E2 grants her 12 recollection points at the start of the battle, and the 2 damage buff from her skill is now increased. This is the best Eidolon in her kit. 12 points at the start, and if you combine with the 6 from the passive, that's 18 points at the very start. And with the single use of her skill and a few abilities from her allies, you can get her ultimate really fast. This by far is the best investment you can provide to your Cyrene. Her E4 increases the bounce damage multiplier of the automatic attack from Cyrene's own buff every time it is used, and this can stack up to 24 times. So basically, with every use of her automatic skill, the damage multiplier gets increased. So if a battle lasts very long, like in Anomaly Arbitration, Cyrene will be doing massive damage with her automatic attack. Lastly, her E6, which gives all allies a 100% action advance when she uses her first ultimate. So basically, with the activate all ally ultimates, now she also provides 100% action advance. Do note that this is only for the first ultimate. Also, when she triggers her own buff, meaning her automatic attack, based on how many times it has triggered, 2 things can happen. If the attack has triggered once, it will reduce 20% defense of all enemy targets. And after the first attack, from second time and onwards, the whole team gets a 24% action advance every time the additional attack happens. Basically a dance proc every automatic attack. Typical of any E6, this is broken. The initial team-wide action advance combined with the 24% action advance every time the additional attack triggers, this will generate a lot of tempo for the whole team. But that's what you expect from an E6. It's supposed to be broken as hell. Overall, her E1 and E2 are the 2 Eidolons that you should be looking at if you do want to vertically invest on her, even though it is not recommended, given her not so bright future. I did talk about it in my previous should you pull video, so check that out if you haven't, but TLDR, her E2 is the goal to fix her slow ramp up time. Her E1 looks good, but only pull for it if you plan to go for her E2. Without that, just her E1 is a waste of J's in my opinion. By the way, if you are enjoying the content, please consider subscribing, as it does help the channel grow and motivates me to make more content for you guys. Now let's finally talk about her builds. First is her Lightcones, and given the extremely short roster of Remembrance Lightcones, even among them, there are only 3 options that you can use on her. The best is obviously her signature. This thing provides 18% speed and up to 16% vulnerability to all the enemies, and around 25% crit damage to the whole team. The trigger condition does require Cyrene to use both of her Memosprite skill, the buff and the attack, but since you only want to focus on buffing, the automatic attack from her own buff will trigger this condition. That's why I said earlier that her automatic attack does help with her Lightcone, but mainly the 18% speed is what you want. It really helps with her speed goal of 180, which you always want to reach. The best alternative is going to be Hyacine's Lightcone. It also provides 18% speed with some extra things like AoE HP consumption that can give more charge to Evernight. It also provides some additional damage and provides 18% vulnerability to all enemies at S1. This Lightcone in general is a really good option for any Remembrance unit, but the 18% speed really makes it one of Cyrene's best options. The third and the last option you can use is the Hertaso Lightcone. At S5, this provides 12% speed, which is low compared to the 18% from her signature, but even that amount of speed really helps with her speed goal. The extra damage for the team only lasts the initial segment of the battle, because after her first ultimate, Cyrene can only use her enhanced basic attack, but the 12% speed alone makes it the best and the only F2P option for Cyrene. As for what to get between her signature and her E1, personally I would say neither, because as I said earlier, I don't recommend vertically investing on her, but if you want to, I'd recommend going for her E1 first. Not only it provides more damage overall, it also gets you closer to that awesome E2. Also, we already have pretty good F2P options with the Hertastro Lightcone, so there is no need to go for her signature, unless you're already using that Lightcone on someone else, like Hyacine. In that case, I still don't recommend getting her Lightcone. Instead, I would recommend going for Hyacine's Lightcone, so that you can use that on Hyacine and use the Hertastro Lightcone on Cyrene. Luckily, Hyacine is getting a rerun in the first half of the next patch, so I hope you have saved up some Jades. Now for our best relic sets. Alright, first things first, if you are struggling to reach the 180 speed goal with a proper 4-piece set, then don't bother until you get a 4-piece set that does let you reach that high speed. Do note her first priority is to get the proper stats before the proper set. Speaking of which, there is not a clear best set for Cyrene in my opinion. If you want damage, the Deliverer set is going to be the best for that. It provides crit rate and HP and provides damage boost to the whole team. It's perfect for a pseudo support like Cyrene if you can reach the desired speed goal. If not, then a 2-piece combo of any speed set are going to be your best option. And that's what I'm going to be using, because my relic luck sucks ass. As for the 2-piece sets, here as well, there's not a clear winner. If you want the best option for damage, then the new M4 years the Eternal Land set is going to be the best. It provides crit rate and speed for all allies. Another option is going to be the Bone Collection set. It increases HP and provides more crit damage. But once again, if you cannot reach the 180 speed goal, then the 3 set might be more helpful for you. The outgoing healing part is useless for Cyrene, but the 6% speed is super valuable. Overall, if you have really good speed stats on her best damage set, then use those. Otherwise, just focus on getting as much speed as you can, even with random pieces. For her relic stats, as usual, here's a build for reference. Everything here is calculated with F2P Lightcones and relics with the lowest substat rolls. So hopefully you should be able to reach something like this eventually. For main stats, since she already gets 50% crit rate from her ultimate, go for a crit damage body. An HP percentage body will be better for more charge generation for Castorice's ultimate, but Cyrene already gets extra HP boost from her Memosprite talent, so either HP% or crit damage are fine. For the boots, go for speed obviously, and go HP percentage on both orb and the rope. Here as well, you can go for ice damage on the orb, but HP is more useful for the team she wants to be played in, like with Castorice. For substats, try to get as much speed as possible, and some crit stats would be nice as well. For stat goals, well, for crit rate and crit damage, 30% crit rate should be your goal at least. With the extra 50%, that would make it 80%, but the more closer it is to 100%, the better. For crit damage, around 160% should be good enough, but you don't have to worry too much about her damage. She is first of all a support, with some damage as a bonus. Finally, her speed. Try to reach 180 speed minimum to trigger the third passive. It's much harder than it looks compared to someone like Hyacine, because her base speed and the amount of speed she gets from her bonus stats are much lower. Hyacine's base speed is 110 and she gets 14 speed as a bonus. As for Cyrene, her base speed is 101 and she gets 9 speed as bonus. So it is much harder than Hyacine. On average, with the Hertastro Lightcone and with no extra speeds from relic sets, that's an average of 6.6 speed per relic piece. You can opt for a 2-piece speed combo, and that will lower the requirement to around 4.2 speed per piece, which is much more achievable than 6.6. Another thing you can do is if you have really good luck with the relics and you went for a Lightcone, then with the same 2-piece speed combo and an average of 7 speed per piece, you can reach 200 speed on her. This will give her 3 turns in the first cycle, meaning 9 points of recollection through her skill. This does have great benefits, but it's extremely hard to achieve. For players who can, well, you definitely are lucky. And for players with no luck for good relics like me, just try to reach 180, and that should be good enough. Now for her rotations. Your main goal here at E0 is to get her ultimate within the first cycle. It should look something like this. You always want 3 Krasos heirs in your team. With Hyacine as a sustain, you can use Heng PT, but his point generation is much slower than Hyacine. Alright, she starts with 6 points because of the passive, then if she has 180 speed, she should be able to take at least 2 turns in the first cycle. That's 6 more points. Then we have Hyacine, who should be over 200 speed, so she will be able to take 3 turns in the first cycle, and her Memosprite Ika will do the same, and that will generate 6 more points in total. As for the rest 2 allies, they should be able to take 2 turns in the first cycle at least, so that will generate 2 points for both, resulting in a total of 22 points. If you add a few ultimates from other teammates, or some extra turns from Ika, that should give you the last 2 points, and Cyrene will be able to use her ultimate. This is how her charge generation works for most teams, but if you have a full remembrance team, then with all the extra actions from all the Memosprites, they will be able to generate 24 points much faster. It shows how much she wants to be played with other remembrance units. Now there are a few ways by which you can reach the same level of point generation even without a full remembrance team. The first option is the one I talked about with her stats. If you can build a 200 speed Cyrene, which is really hard to do, that will give her one more turn in the first cycle, and that means 3 more points. For the second option, you can use the RMC to action advance Cyrene to give her another turn in the first cycle. And lastly, you can also use the Dance 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 Lightcone to give the entire team action advance. And more actions means more points. All in all, your end goal at E0 is to get her ultimate as fast as you can within the first cycle. And finally, her synergies. Now in my last video, I already talked about all of her synergies with different teams, the good ones and the bad ones. And this video has already become way too long. So here, let's only go through the good ones. But before that, let's talk about the one character that she has the best synergy with, Hyacine. By now you should already know how important Hyacine is for Cyrene. She is by far the best unit for point generation. She's both a Chrysos Heir and a Remembrance unit. She's super fast and has a fast acting Memosprite. On top of that, her buff is something that doesn't even need her to be targeted by Cyrene to be activated. It just gets activated automatically when Cyrene uses her skill on anyone, meaning she can simply focus on the DPS and Hyacine will automatically get buffed. She is the current best sustain in the game and can be played in any team. She's by far one of the most versatile units in the HSR. She's the perfect teammate for Cyrene and is not even close. Now starting with the teams. Her current best team is going to be with Castorice and Evernight, a full remembrance team. Both Cyrene and her teammates synergize super well with each other. As I said just now with the rotations, remembrance units have an advantage in generating points for Cyrene, because unlike normal units, Memosprites do not consume their future buff, so they can generate as many points as they want without any worry. Not only that, both Castorice and Evernight have permanent buffs, so Cyrene can simply use her first 2 buffs on both of them and then just focus on dealing damage, or she can keep buffing Hyacine for more energy. This is by far the best team in the game, period. Nothing comes close to it. It's great in AoE, it's great in single target, it's just the best team currently available. Well, until 4.0 comes out and we get hit with more power creep. But we don't talk about that. For alternatives, you can use this team with either Castorice or Evernight and replace the other with either RMC or Tribbie. Both have their benefits. RMC can action advance Cyrene for more points and his buff triggers the automatic attack from Cyrene, which makes him the best unit to bring out Cyrene's damage. As for Tribbie, she also has a permanent buff, so she doesn't have to be targeted constantly. She provides very strong damage buffs to the entire team, which Cyrene also benefits from. She can hold DDD and has great synergy with Hyacine. Either of them can work, just use the one that is available to you. The next one is going to be a Mydei Team, and here as well you need Hyacine, because she is the only Chrysos Heir that can heal, and Mydei needs healing. For the third slot, Tribbie works the best in my opinion, for all the reasons I just mentioned. She has permanent buff, provides great damage amp, and has really good synergy with Hyacine, and can also hold DDD. It's Mydei's current best team by far. There are some replacements, like you can use RMC in place of Tribbie, for all the reasons I also mentioned just a moment ago. Since there is not a lot of Memosprites in this team to generate points, having a 100% action advance is great for better point generation. But in terms of overall team damage, Tribbie is slightly better, especially if we have an S5 DDD on her. The last one we have is Anaxa, and this team is slightly better than his original team, which is with Sunday. And here you can use Heng PT in place of Hyacine, but Hyacine is still better. Now you do need Cerydra for the best performance, and there is something you need to look out for. Since the Kuda main buff activates based on charge, and Cyrene's buffs gives him an action advance, you cannot use both of them in the same turn. Like if Anaxa's current turn has the quadruple skill, if you use Cyrene's buff now, then the action advance will be wasted. So you need to make sure that when you use Cyrene's buff on Anaxa, it's the upcoming turn that triggers the quadruple skill. It's a bit technical, and you need to be very careful about when to use Cyrene's buff, and there will be times where you won't be able to line up both Cyrene and Cerydra's buffs properly, because the Kuda main effect can also trigger on the second skill of a normal double skill from Anaxa. So do expect some weird interactions in this whole rotation. But overall, this is the best team for Anaxa. For alternatives, you can use Sunday in place of Cerydra if she is busy with another team like Phainon, but at that point a normal Sunday team with Cerydra or even Robin and Heng PT will perform pretty much the same if not better. As I said, the Cyrene team is just a bit better than the current Anaxa team. And those are the 3 teams that I recommend playing with Cyrene. Now there are other Chrysos Heir damage dealers that she buffs, but they either don't get that much benefit from her or their current teams are just better. I explained this much better in my last video, so check that out if you want. But these 3 are the only teams that benefit the most from having Cyrene. Overall, Cyrene is one of those units where if she is good, she is really good, and if she is bad, she is unusable. Also note that she heavily relies on Hyacine, so you should have her in your account if you want to play Cyrene properly. She is definitely a very specific unit, so if you know what you want and you know that your account has teams that will benefit from Cyrene, then sure, go for it. But if you don't think that's the case, then I guess skipping her for other supports or just saving might be better, as 4.0 is coming soon. And that's going to be it for this super ultra long guide. I really hope it answered any questions you had about Cyrene. If you still have anything else, you can leave it in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Like and sub if you enjoy my content. Thanks a lot for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.